Ask you to rise so executive pledge allegiance with us. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and welcome. Any additions or changes to the agenda, Brad?
There are none, Your Honor.
Any written public comments?
We received none.
Okay, next thing on the agenda is public comments. If anybody's here to address us on things that are not on the agenda, we would entertain those comments at this time. Seeing none, we'll move forward then with the consent agenda. The following items are considered non-controversial by staff and are recommended to be read and passed in one motion. Any person, a council person, staff, citizen, or meeting attendee can request one or more items to be pulled from the consent agenda. And then the item will be pulled and addressed immediately after the passage of the consent agenda. Otherwise, the following items will be passed in one motion. Number one, approve the city council work session minutes from December 16th, 2025. Number two, approve the city council minutes from December 16th, 2025. Number three, approve the payment of bills and finance report. Number four, adopt resolution 2026-001, establishing the 2026 council appointments. Number five, adopt resolution 2026-002, establishing the 2026 annual designations. Number six, authorize execution of annual advertising contract with the Brainerd Dispatch. Number seven, approve amendments to the building official job description. Number eight, approve the appointment to the seasonal position of morning house attendant. Number nine, approve the SEH contract in the not to exceed amount of $57,292 for the 2026 Baxter WTP HVAC improvements. Number 10, approve the issuance of a lower potency hemp edible registration to Jack Pine Brewery for the period of January 7th, 2026 through December 31st, 2026.
Please pull number 10.
Number 11, adopt resolution 2026-003, submitting an application for phase 2 of the Southeast Baxter Surface Water Overflow Project.
Move approval of the consent agenda with 10 poll.
Second. Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Number 10,
I'm the applicant, so I'm going to abstain from voting.
he's going to abstain. Motion to approve number 10. Motion by Cross.
Second.
Second by Tavin. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And that was the only one. So we're moving on to number 12, acceptance of the KLJ Executive Summary of Independent Review of Final Layout of Highway 371 Overpass Project.
Thank you, Mayor. As the council is aware, the city has contracted with KLJ to do an independent third-party review of the final layout that was submitted by MnDOT for the Highway 371 Overpass Project. Joe DeVore, who is the project engineer for KLJ, who was the lead on this review, is here in attendance to present his findings. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joe.
Thanks, Brad. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This project has been very controversial over the past year, and even before that, back to its start in 2019. I was hired by the city to kind of look at the technical information from all sides on this controversial project. I wanted to understand where the city was gaining benefit from it, where MnDOT was gaining benefit from it, where impacts were occurring, maybe even where businesses could see benefits from this project, and bring all that technical information into a presentation, into an executive summary that can help you make a very difficult decision ahead of you on a controversial subject. So a little bit about myself to start. I've got about 15 years of experience in traffic engineering. I've got my professional engineering license, professional traffic engineer, and then a road safety professional. I've worked on a number of city, county, state, and MPO projects throughout Minnesota and the region. worked on a lot of MnDOT projects in the past. I've not been a part of this one, so I don't have a conflict of interest there. But I've been a part of some of the past ones in this area up with the Brainerd International Raceway. RCIs, I've worked on the Washington Street project to the east of our study area, and then several projects up north of here in Walker and Bemidji as well. I've done area-wide safety reviews, master transportation plans, where I can really see the whole picture that a project has to play on a community. And then I've done technical reviews like this before, all the way from intersection improvements up to freeway reviews and interstate reviews, trying to get down to the technical information needed to make decisions from the study. So I do want this to be a presentation that allows you to ask questions at the end, and hopefully I'll have answers that I can provide from my technical experience for you tonight. So 6 main topics I wanted to cover in my presentation. We're really looking at some of the technical information of why this project's needed. Regional and local travel time, safety information, understanding those safety benefits that this project will bring to addressing a crash rate that's very high. Understanding business concerns. I was able to meet with the Chamber of Commerce as well as several businesses that had a large stake in this project. I listened to what the impacts they felt this project would bring to them, and really wanted to validate some of their concerns that they felt hadn't been validated, as well as bringing considerations for how those compare to projects like this happening throughout the state. I wanted to do an effective areas summary, really pinpointing the intersection decisions and what my technical opinion is on those. And then get down into kind of reviewing that alternative selection process and what those near-term considerations are of the proposed project. So I want to start out framing this from kind of the region-wide perspective. 371 is a major highway, north-south highway through the center of our state. It goes right through the center of Baxter. It's been an economic driver for the city of Baxter over the years with a lot of commercial development along it. But it also depends on a lot of pass-by trips. When people are going up to their cabins, when people are going to Walker, to Grand Rapids, to Bemidji, they're driving through Baxter on the way there throughout the years because of the commercial, the restaurants, and even coming to the Brainerd Lakes area, the hotels, those types of businesses along this corridor. But when we start looking at regional travel times going to the north, there's a lot of delay in Baxter. So when people choose to take a regional trip and they put it in their GPS, Highway 64 is starting to come up as that preferred route. So unless they're stopping, consciously choosing to stop for dinner in Baxter, consciously choosing to stop along the way in Baxter, they're starting to take some of these alternate routes along 64 and 169, especially when there is congestion in Baxter affecting those travel times. We've seen the volume using 371 in Baxter plateau over the last 10 years. It's been at about 29,000 average daily travel per day. That goes up and down based on busy weekends, less busy weekends, everyday weekdays. But that's how MnDOT kind of estimates that average daily traffic coming through Baxter. Whereas 64 has seen an increase, 169 has been pretty consistent as well. But on that previous screen, you can see some of those travel times are kind of right on that boundary between going through Baxter or Brainerd and taking other north-south routes in the area. Just looking at some of those numbers, it's really between about 10 minutes going to and from Bemidji, but you're getting down to basically the same travel time as you're considering taking a trip from Little Falls to Walker or from Little Falls to Grand Rapids. Another thing I wanted to look at was how common is that delay coming through Baxter. One tool that we have access to is ClearGuide. which really looks at the speed and travel times going through Baxter on 371. So this is from down at College Drive to north of Boyder Road. And you can see right in the middle, all of that red is 210 Excelsior. And then as you see it on the north, that's Boyda. So the majority of that delay along 371 is at those two intersections. It adds about a minute of delay for that 11 to 12 hour period. Throughout the day, it gets up to about 2 minutes during those daily peak hours, and it can be 5 to 15 minutes during recreational peaks. That adds on to those travel times, and that's really where you get the range on that regional travel time figure. Other delay sources, just with the at-grade railroad crossing, those 6 trains per day are adding 3 to 8 additional minutes of travel time for people coming through this area. So that's affecting 29,000 vehicles a day that are coming through both the Excelsior and 210 intersections. The distribution of where those trips are coming from, we also used GPS data through a vendor called Streetlight Data to look at what the origin destinations of traffic both regionally were, as well as going to business areas in this corridor. So we have kind of the northeast, northwest, and southwest business areas, which represent about 11% of traffic coming through these intersections are going to one of those businesses. About 89% of that traffic is either turning from 210 to 371 or continuing straight on either 210 or 371. And 2 times more traffic is destined to either the north or the east through these intersections. So Brainerd to the east, north on 371, Nisswa, more communities to the north. That's got more of a pull on traffic than the west or the south for daily traffic. From those businesses, 3 times as much traffic is going to the north or the east versus the south and the west. So this is really important as we start getting into some of these impacts to specific businesses to understand where the majority of traffic is coming from, accessing these businesses within your community. We also wanted to kind of do an independent review on local travel times. So going in and out of these different areas, we picked 5 businesses. Mills GMC kind of representing that northeast quadrant, Poncho and Lefties northwest, Baymount, Fairview Road, Papa Murphy's and State Farm on Golf Course Drive, and then TJ Maxx, PetSmart, also Costco on that southwest. And we wanted to look at how these travel times were being affected with the current proposed button hook design. Only 2 of the 20 travel times into these businesses are being increased because of that button hook interchange. And they are the Clearwater to Mills GMC, so from the north, taking a southbound left into Clearwater Road. That one gets more congested in the future and will actually add travel time getting into it. And then getting to Elder Drive from the west, so eastbound 210, making that right turn. Because of the closure of Elder Drive, the kind of moving that access west to Foley and then that additional travel time getting in adds a little over half a minute to get into those businesses. The rest of these intersections are either just a couple seconds or they're reducing the delay caused by 210 and Excelsior to where traffic can get into these businesses faster. So just that, looking at that existing delay of those 2 signals, this is on a per vehicle basis. You get about 80 to 100 seconds of delay between both 210 and Excelsior Road. And that's really been the operational need for looking at improvements at these 2 intersections. From a safety standpoint, I've done a lot of work looking into the statistics. It's number 3 on the highest crash intersections in Minnesota over the last 3 years, 371 and 210. It's actually the highest signalized intersection crash rate in the state over those last 3 years. So 163 crashes over those 3 years. Elder Drive and 210 is the highest uncontrolled intersection crash rate within Minnesota. So just those two intersections being right next to each other have been a huge safety issue, not just over the last 3 years, but over the last decades, where there's been a high crash rate compared to any other intersection within Minnesota. Over 90 crashes per year are occurring in this study area. So every year that something isn't done at these intersections, those 90 crashes can be expected in those years that we do nothing. So this is an urgent matter. It is time sensitive because there are 90 crashes happening per year. And while at 210, all of those have not been serious injury type crashes, there are some of those intersections, uncontrolled intersections in close proximity that have had those serious injuries occur. So looking at the currently proposed button hook design, there's several elements of this design that I want you to kind of understand the safety benefits of. First is an interchange. An interchange by itself usually reduces crashes in that 40% range. Your grade separating one of the approaches, you're eliminating or reducing the delay caused by that intersection because of that free movement for that large traffic volume. And usually you're designing those intersections to be much safer than the full intersection that it's replacing. Single lane roundabouts statewide have provided about a 27% crash reduction, but the biggest benefit is reduction of serious injury type crashes. There's been an 80% plus reduction in fatal and serious injuries at single lane roundabouts statewide. And then 2x1 roundabouts, so this is where there's 2 lanes on the major approaches, 1 lane on the minor. Those have actually increased crash rates, but in this situation, we're reducing the volume going through them. So it's still reducing overall crashes, but comparatively, it could increase some crashes at that specific lower volume intersection. That's been a big reason why MnDOT likes to minimize roundabouts, where they want to provide a single lane until it's really at that capacity mark, and then they'll increase the lanes so that it has the capacity to limit delay. Overall, with this interchange, I looked at those crash rates per volume going through them. This toll project would likely reduce the crashes by 60 to 70% compared to that 90 crashes per year in the study area. So it's a huge benefit looking at crash reduction in this project area. So I want to shift gears now into some of our business input. I presented some of that information to the businesses, but I also wanted to hear from them what they felt were the impacts caused by this project. One of the main topics I heard was that this design is complicated and confusing. Looking at it top down, there's 6 roundabouts that you now have to navigate to get to businesses where today you go through a stoplight, you turn left at a stoplight. It is more complicated. Some of the statewide considerations with this is interchanges tend to create more movements. You're taking a singular intersection, you're breaking it up into 2 separate intersections and trying to provide access from those 2 intersections to the businesses around them. And it does become complicated. One thing that this design does provide is it simplifies 4 of the 6 roundabouts. So 4 of the 6 roundabouts are 3-leg roundabouts, and they're single-lane roundabouts. So as you come into that intersection, there will be signage with a simple left or right decision, and you'll either be going east on 210, west on 210, or I want to go to Excelsior or to 210. Signage can simplify these types of movements coming through this interchange design. Another thing is the roundabout spacing. It is a large footprint because of those roundabouts spaced so that drivers have the ability to read signs, make a decision before they get up to that intersection, to then look and make sure that they have a gap in order to drive into that roundabout. So part of the review was looking at that decision time. They are spaced in a way where drivers should be able to make that decision at every intersection, and as long as it's signed good, they should be able to understand what that wayfinding is getting around. With any project, there is a learning curve. This will be complicated and confusing to people at the start. As they learn if they're coming north from their house and they want to go to Concho Lefties, they will have to go through 3 roundabouts. They'll learn which direction and it'll become second nature over the long haul. We've seen a lot of projects statewide where roundabouts have a lot of opposition at the start, but after, we get a lot of comments that why weren't these added sooner? You know, it does become intuitive to use. So I do think signage is a big part of this project. It hasn't been talked about a lot, or maybe it has, but it's a key component to keep in mind as if this project keeps moving forward, that signage does need to be very uncomplicated. Another concern from businesses was the need to minimize backtracking. With any interchange project, usually we're looking at a mile of spacing from that interchange before we have access. In urban areas, sometimes that boundary is pushed back to 3/4 mile or half a mile. But the problem with the interchange is as there's vehicles merging or exiting the freeway, there's lane changes occurring along 371 where we really want to minimize traffic turning in and out of that stream while people are merging lanes. So that's where coming into a project like this, that spacing between intersections is so important. In my professional opinion, I don't see access at both Excelsior and 210 if one of them is an interchange. So really those 2 intersections need to be combined in order to have access to both of them while still serving the safety and operations benefits of those 2 intersections. Project considerations for kind of backtracking Clearwater is about a half a mile north of the proposed interchange. This is going to be an at-grade intersection. This intersection is probably the highest risk I see of having a serious injury or a crash rate occur because of this project. Because to the south, you're taking away 2 signals that slow down traffic coming into that intersection, and you're reducing you're removing the design road access and putting a lot of that left turning traffic at Clearwater. So this was an intersection that in my report, I noted that it needs to have some type of improvement looked at for the immediate near term of either with the project or directly after the project going in. Another thing to minimize backtracking is signage to hopefully address that backtracking. If people know that there's businesses coming up that they can get to if they exit, that allows those vehicles to exit the freeway where they're supposed to and limit their travel time getting to those businesses. So I have talked with MnDOT. They did support businesses going out and working with Minnesota's vendor for these road signs for kind of wayside destinations. So this would be an example sign for northbound 371 where it would actually list 2 gas, 2 food, 2 lodging, or some combination of those up to 6 businesses. So that people know to enter northbound at the interchange instead of going down to Clearwater and trying to backtrack. The same can be said coming southbound. This is a little bit different characteristic of a corridor where it's not a freeway coming in to the project area from the north. So that signage would likely be more just directional for gas, food, and lodging based on what those businesses are at Clearwater. But advanced signage does help to address some of these concerns. There is, again, going to be that learning curve of if people are going up north to their cabin, they may miss it the first time, but that learning process, if that interchange is there, they will likely learn that fastest path in, and that's where you do see some of those travel time benefits. Business visibility was another impact that is going to be hard on these businesses because 371 is being raised up into the air. This was a topic we talked on the city about, where the city would likely have to change their ordinance on sign height within kind of this area for that adjacent roadway height. So if the roadway height's going up by 30 feet, that allows the signs to get up over that eye level of vehicles on 371 and be able to visually see the businesses that they're interacting with. That is going to be a cost to the businesses if they are looking at doing those signs. So that is a big impact to the business community with this project, is having their business be visible from a roadway that is elevating. Kind of a statewide consideration for this is the Highway 65 corridor down in Blaine. Whenever you're looking at interchanges, you tend to look at consolidating intersections into those interchanges because you want that mile spacing of interchanges. So 65 provides a good case study where they're constructing the next year 10 intersections down into 4 interchanges, all spaced at over that mile spacing. Another consideration that the chamber brought up was speeds through the study area. I think this is one where I tend to agree that the lower speeds are going to be critical, especially with Clearwater to the north being an unsignalized intersection. With that existing 50-mile-an-hour speed limit, it does control that max speed of traffic coming through this study area or project area. However, as you start looking at the design of an interchange, that is going to encourage higher speeds. This is a balancing act for MnDOT. It's not as easy as just going out and signing it at 50 miles an hour, but there can be elements that the city requests be added to the project as it advances, such as lane width, such as how long accelerations are, to kind of create friction going through these intersections to hopefully have that design speed be closer to 50 or 55 miles an hour versus 60 or 65 that's been thrown out. I do have major concerns with the project if it is left at 65 miles an hour with that Clearwater intersection to the north, because traffic coming northbound is going to be able to reach that speed, and then if crashes are occurring, those are going to be more serious. So one of my considerations was to reduce speed and to look at improvements at Clearwater Road. And then Woyder Road, looking at this intersection, the chamber did identify that fewer intersections to the south may increase traffic at Woyder Road. I think some traffic is going to shift there, but I think the majority of that design road traffic is going to shift to Clearwater, to where it's likely going to be at capacity or over capacity, where MnDOT does need to look at improvements there. Adding an interchange at Woyder Road long-term would close that access to the south, so Clearwater would be closed if an interchange gets added in at Woyder. But with the MnDOT corridor study on 371, they did identify a near-term option that was the signalized R-cut, or the right and then U-turn option. The big benefit with this is it's going from a 4-phase signal down to a 2-phase signal. So there's the mainline phase, and then there's the turning phase for that signalized R-cut. Something similar could be implemented at Clearwater Road if that our cut option was chose at Woyda Road. And it would provide a corridor to the north of the project area that raised capacity for mainline, but still allowed access at both Woyda and Clearwater Road for the near term. So getting into specific project area summaries. Elder Drive and Foley Road was the first one. So Elder Drive is being proposed to be closed and shifted to the west to Foley Road. This was originally proposed as a right-in, right-out by MnDOT. However, it was increased to a 3/4 access after discussions with city staff. This does add about a half mile of additional travel distance. So thinking of those vehicles coming from the west, they're not able to turn right at Elder Drive to get to Costco. You have to follow Foley Road and then backtrack in. That's where some of that travel time was adding about half a minute. For traffic coming from the east, traffic from East 210 and North 371 may end up coming down to Glory Road and coming into this development from that direction. Getting rid of the two signals at 210 and Excelsior, that makes that traffic a lot easier to access this development from the south side versus the west side. That additional travel distance as well is going to shift more of that traffic to Foley Road. So that was another intersection I saw as needing some additional capacity improvements as well. So getting to Glory Road, our projected traffic change on that Glory Road west approach is about 3,300 additional daily vehicles. And those are really being added in that eastbound left direction and southbound right direction into that development. And it's really coming from that Elder Drive existing intersection. So looking at what some of those recreational peak volume increases are, 300 plus vehicles for that eastbound left, 400 plus for the southbound right. That eastbound approach on the west leg needs to consider having a dual left turn added to it with this project. What that'll allow is more capacity to use this intersection versus using Elder Drive, which again was the #1 crash intersection. That's getting shifted to Foley, but it's a similar conflict between high-speed traffic coming in from the west with a high volume of traffic trying to get into this business development. Fairview Road was the next kind of highlight. The initial MnDOT recommendation was to close this access. That would have impacted that westbound right into Fairview Road by about 2.5 minutes because they'd have to go all the way to the west a mile and then double back a mile. So that was a very big impact to businesses along Fairview Road. The eastbound left is less impacted by this because of that roundabout to the east now. You can come into that roundabout, make a U-turn, and get to that access in about the same amount of time as it would have taken you to find a gap to turn left existing. So that was a travel time that wasn't impacted as much. And there's actually benefits for traffic coming out of that development and going east, either 371 or east into Brainerd, because of that shift to Foley Road. We now have a U-turn opportunity for traffic to turn right and then make the U-turn at Foley Road, utilizing that direct crossover into that left turn lane. So getting out of Fairview Road will be a lot easier versus today's conditions. Affected area number 3 is westbound 210. So this was looking at the roundabout design. This roundabout is the highest volume roundabout in the entire project because it's combining eastbound left traffic from coming into town from the west. It's combining right turning traffic going to the north from Brainerd, and it's combining traffic coming from 371 going to 210. So all 4 of those turning movements at the existing intersection are all combined into this one roundabout. That's why MnDOT was looking at a 2x1 roundabout. But their lane utilization was really looking at each lane having an equal amount of vehicles. As we start looking at this interchange, a lot of that traffic's turning right here, but the next intersection is also that access to southbound 371, where a lot of the time drivers will get in that right lane coming into the interchange to where that right lane is going to be a lot higher volume. So looking at the volume turning right here, as well as a baseline amount, that lane utilization is going to be about 60-40, 65-35%. And that really puts this conflict right at the capacity mark. So I did bring this up to MnDOT during one of our discussions. They were going to bring that information back to the geometric design unit with central office and really look at, is this a day of opening concern, or is it something that they could implement in the future 10 years down the road? But that was the one capacity location in this interchange design that I wanted them to take a second look at. Two things that would address that would either be making a channelized right movement that separates out that right turning volume so that the rest of the roundabout would operate under capacity, or having two lanes coming to the north into that roundabout, a dedicated left turn lane to get to 371 or one to get to Excelsior. This was identified in some of their preliminary layouts as a long-term consideration for expanding those roundabouts. Golf course drive to the east, businesses wanted to maintain the existing three-quarter access. MnDOT originally was looking at getting rid of it. They went back to a right-in, right-out concept. I took a lot of time with this project looking at what that queuing from this roundabout back through this intersection would be. During recreational peaks, there's about 4 to 6 hours a day where that westbound queue would likely back up close to this intersection. And what happens when you have a queue extending into an unsignalized turn is driver confusion crossing both lanes, where someone in the left lane will stop short of the intersection, allowing that vehicle to come in, or that right lane vehicle will come through and you'll get a right angle crash. So that's really where I do see this being too close to that roundabout to add in that left in. It was a spot where the city really wanted to see that added, but that was a spot where I did disagree with city staff on whether that should be added back in. Excelsior Road Bridge and Visibility. So again, this is going into kind of that business visibility slide that I presented on. The city did request that bridge clearance be reduced to that minimum state aid clearance of 14 feet. With the walls, that gets less than that 30 feet that was originally proposed. But again, that sign height's really going to be important as we consider how this is impacting the businesses that are going from at grade today with traffic passing in front of them to having to be visible from 371 to secure those pass-by trips. And then Design Road, this is kind of tying back to that backtracking slide. So looking at right turns that are displaced by Design Road closing, so that northbound right ends up getting added about 30 seconds, taking the frontage road versus just coming through up to Design Road. The right turn getting into Design Road from the north, if they do turn at that advanced signage, it's only a 20-second increase. If they miss the turn and have to come through the interchange, it adds about 90 seconds. So that's, again, where visibility is very important for these businesses to take advantage of those pass-by trips and make sure that signage in advance of those turnoffs is provided in MnDOT's final design. Same thing with left turns. So that southbound left turn at Clearwater adds about 50 seconds to get to the east side of Design Road. That was the biggest impact out of all of this Design Road closure, revised travel times. It's actually easier to get to that northwest quadrant, exiting and going through these roundabouts than the two signals at 210 and Excelsior today, just because they're crossing all of that traffic coming southbound on 371 today. With the roundabouts, they're going through 3 low capacity. We're only expecting about 5 to 10 seconds at the most of delay going through each of those intersections, which is a big reduction over about 80 seconds with the combined signal delay today. And then tying that back to kind of the final affected area, Clearwater Road. This really is in the middle of a long-term vision for 371. It's about a 0.6 mile spacing from that proposed interchange between 210 and Excelsior. It's about a half-mile spacing from Warrior Road. However, those left turns are going to increase from about 70 to 100 today, up close to 200 once Design Road's closed. So that's taking what you would expect today when you're trying to make a left turn and doubling the amount of traffic trying to make that. That means there's going to be less available gaps, and it's going to raise the crash rate at that intersection likely. Looking at kind of that interregional corridor signal spacing, MnDOT's guidance says half-mile minimum spacing for a signal. So while that is close to an interchange, that will need to be a conversation with MnDOT. It does meet that signal spacing from Warrior Road. However, both of these intersections at Warrior Road and Clearwater Road need to be looked at together for a kind of harmonious improvement that affects some of these concerns caused by this project on the south side. So getting into kind of the last few slides I had before questions, this has been a long process for this project. KLJ was one of the original consultants that proposed on this project. I believe it was back in 2019 when interchange concepts were started to be looked at 210 and 371. The MnDOT decided to go a different way with another consultant, but they've been doing good work where they've considered about 49 ideas for how this intersection or interchange could look. That value engineering drove it down into about 17 concepts that started doing technical evaluation. Through a level 1 screening of really looking at those safety, mobility, and cost considerations, they got down to 7. And then they got down to kind of 3 remaining that went into more of that detailed analysis, and then another round of value engineering. So this was just a graphic of those 17 options, really looking for fatal flaws with those 3, safety, mobility, and cost, to try and optimize the interchanges that were being looked at in detail. When things are looked at in more detail, it costs more money. That's why MnDOT has this screening process to really make sure that detailed analysis really goes into the options that are having the highest benefits. So during this month of me looking at this project, there's been conversation about, are there other options? In addition to the 49 looked at through that MnDOT screening process. The answer is yes, there probably are other options out there. However, there's going to be pros and cons to those options. There might be fatal flaws to those options that would have met that level 1 screening and screened them out. One concept that was shared by an anonymous party was looking at kind of combining the intersections of Design and Excelsior into more of a one-way separated diamond interchange. The pros of an option like this is you kind of maintain that access to and from 371 from Design Road. And you have those ramps versus loops, so you have more consistent speed entering in and out of 371. But there's also cons. There's an additional bridge compared to the proposed option that's on the table now. That equals more costs. 371 is still going to be elevated with this type of design. There's still going to be those visibility considerations. One-way frontage roads make it harder for local access because you may have to cross through 371, go north, and then come back to Design Road. So there is some circuitous travel with an option like this. And then you still have some of that interchange spacing with 210. How does this tie into an improvement there? That's kind of a black box with a concept like this. So yes, there are other options, but looking through the MnDOT design process has really centered on fixing the needs at Excelsior Road and 210. 210 needs an interchange because of the railroad, because of the deficient operations at it. And with Excelsior being so closely spaced, the Button Hook interchange really provides the most straightforward option that provides access to both Excelsior Road and 210 from one interchange. So looking at this Button Hook versus two other options that I heard were preferred from some of the chamber, the community. I wanted to look at these from just kind of that high level, what was the project-wide benefit. So looking at the intersection by volume at all of the intersections with this Button Hook design compared to the delay per vehicle at each of these concepts, that button hook reduces delay by about 67% over that existing 80 to 100 seconds of delay. Alternative B, with the single point interchange and an accurate intersection to the north, those delays are going to be much less benefit. You're only getting a 20 to 30% benefit for delay reduction. For crashes, because of that interchange roundabout components, we were projecting a higher crash reduction with that interchange versus the other two options. And looking at those final costs, they're going to be high regardless of what interchange ends up going in here. So looking at kind of the decision points that summarize this down into information you guys can use, I saw five key points I wanted to make inside the project area. The first was, this is a major improvement over what's out there today. We're getting a lot of crash benefit, a lot of operations benefit, and we're really utilizing the costs going into this for a long-term vision for 371 and how it interacts with Baxter over the next 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, well into the future. The 210 East Ramp intersection, that westbound approach, is going to become an issue unless some of the considerations are looked at that I raised. MnDOT should really consider speed calming. Elements into the design that look at that max posted speed of 55 miles an hour. If speeds are getting above that, there are going to be crash risk issues at Clearwater that could turn serious. That was probably the biggest concern I had. Baxter sign ordinance. As a council, you will have to look at adjusting those heights to allow businesses to be seen from 371. And then lastly, something for the businesses is really taking advantage of the wayfinding signs that are available to be used to direct people into the businesses with this improvement. Interchange projects are impactful to local access and businesses because they're taking several intersections and combining them into one. But interchanges are put in throughout the state. They're needed when you get to volumes like there are on 371. And when you see that volume plateau over a number of years, where there's clearly more people traveling up north now versus 6 years ago, that's traffic that isn't coming through Baxter because of those delays. Outside the project area, Clearwater Road and Woyder Road need to be priorities. I would recommend that council pushes MnDOT to look at these directly after the interchange project. If those intersections are left alone, Woyder Road could be a bottleneck because of that current four-phase signal. So there are going to be more crash risk at that intersection. And then Clearwater Road will likely see a higher crash risk as well. And then on the south side, Glory Road, that volume increase is going to necessitate that dual left turn. So that is something that MnDOT should look in. There's two options there, either construct a dual left turn lane or convert one of the eastbound through lanes to a left turn lane. That could be just a near-term, low-cost option that could be added with the project. So I've done a lot of talking, a lot of information covered. I want to open it up for questions. I do have a few more slides, maybe after questions if they don't come up in questions, but I wanted to turn it over to the council for immediate reactions.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Council, any information there?
Yeah, well, a comment, it's very impressive what you were able to do in a pretty short time frame as far as analyze and pull things out. I had just one question, and maybe it's not important, but whenever I see money, it's important to me. Looking at the slide near the end where it had the alternate, yeah, that one, and the cost on the bottom. Now, with us getting the $58 million commerce grant that we choose to move forward, the cost that you've indicated here is higher.
I believe these were estimates from a document that was comparing all three. These probably aren't the most recent costs. I just wanted to make sure I took all three costs from the same time.
Okay.
So these may be higher costs, more conservative than what has been detailed by MnDOT to you recently.
What's your question in
Well,
regards
my
to that?
question, I was thinking with the $58 million grant that was going to cover all the costs of the project, and so that the citizens of Baxter, the taxpayers, wouldn't be responsible, except for if we decided to choose the landscaping. Is that's?
Yeah, in the letter requesting municipal consent that MnDOT provided in September, that's kind of blend together, but in September, it identified that the city's participation is zero unless we, as a community, were to decide beautification, things that are outside the catalog, and the allowance that is structured in their project area. So if we wanted to landscape the roundabouts, if we wanted to do decorative lighting, decorative fencing, things of that nature that outside the scope of the aesthetics within MnDOT's guidebook, then yes, that would be our responsibility. The cost of the improvements of the project are the responsibility of MnDOT.
Okay, so these dollars that are on these green slides really is,
It was a comparison.
it's just, okay.
Where they're all three very high dollar amount investments. Whether it's coming from state money or federal money, there's still some part of that that's taxpayers of whatever those buckets of money they're coming from. But if they aren't utilized on this project, they'll likely be utilized on a different project.
Okay.
And then there's a lot of planning and grants that go into securing that amount of money again. So it's going to push this project back several years to get that type of investment again.
The only thing that I would add and want to make sure that it's understood is that that is related to the construction of the button hook, the overpass, things of that nature. As we have discussed all along and with referenced in communications back and forth, there are improvements that will need to be done on local roadways that are outside the project area. So we talk about in the future Fairview getting extended to Excelsior. Having the turn lanes on Foley be reflective of what's at the intersection at Inglewood to make sure that the traffic movement on Foley isn't interrupted and make for those right-hand turns or for those turns onto, to get back onto 210. Those have always been identified outside the project scope and would be our responsibility. But as it relates to the construction of the overpass and the roundabouts is 100%.
So you referenced recreational timeframes. Expound on that if you would.
Yeah, so we looked at modeling that was done for year opening conditions, for AM, PM, and then rec peaks, so different volumes going through the combination of intersections.
So what is a rec?
So the rec peak is the recreational peak. So if you think of Friday afternoons when people are coming northbound on 371 up to the cabin, that's the highest traffic that's coming through these intersections in a directional, in the northbound direction. Whereas in a weekday peak, it's more balanced, there's more turns occurring. So there's different volume sets that MnDOT looked at with their study and that we reviewed to make sure that there weren't any capacity issues with the proposed project for any of those different scenarios. So we looked at.
So a typical Friday, a typical Sunday afternoon.
Yep, those would be recreational peaks.
What about the atypical VIR weekend?
We did not look at a special VIR weekend. That's going to be increasing traffic on 371 going through the intersections, which would make alternatives that have both of those grades separated perform better than ones that had a signal at Excelsior or had some type of traffic control at 210. So the proposed button hook would be better for those kind of highest peak volumes that are coming through these two intersections.
I think it's your first slide. I was just curious, so that's, it looks like you pulled Google Maps.
Yep.
Just want to confirm, so this is some random person is deciding to go home to the cities from Bemidji, Walker, or Grand Rapids, and they're thinking maybe there's a big traffic issue in the cities as there often is, so they pull Google Maps. Right now, this is not some made-up thing that
Nope.
was done for simulation.
I pulled this from Google Maps, I think 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The one on the left is more of a direct route at that time. The one in the middle is me putting in a specific time that I'm leaving. I chose 4 o'clock, so I'd be kind of in that PM peak. That's where you see that range where there could be anywhere, that travel time could be 1 hour 30 up to 2 hours. That's accounting for kind of that, so that was arriving at 5 p.m. Versus if you had taken 64, you'd arrive 20 minutes later reliably. So what this allows you to do in Google Maps is really look at the reliability of those trips occurring between those destinations. And when you see those times expand, they're less reliable trips. And if someone goes through Baxter during a recreational weekend, and they do have that instance where they're adding 10 minutes, 15 minutes onto their travel time, that next trip they're going to take is going to be that more reliable trip that they know they're going to get home at a certain time if they're wanting to just drive home. There's a lot of research and technical studies into pass-by trips. Whether they happen just because people are driving by something and they go, I need gas, I'm gonna pull off, those are more random because it's dependent on how much fuel is in your tank. For restaurants, it's more time of day when you're driving through. If someone's leaving at 3 o'clock, they're less likely to stop for dinner. If they're leaving at 4:30, they're more likely to stop for dinner. But those are also the times when 371 has the most delay occurring, is in those peaks when there's more traffic going to and from these businesses. So that's really where it plays back to that 371 really hasn't grown in the last 10 years, even though volume going north in Minnesota from the cities has increased.
So you are saying that because the average daily traffic hasn't really grown on 371 in 10 years, people are just finding other routes?
There are a lot of minor routes being used. Travel demand on a statewide basis is really hard because you look at your main state highways and those are the ones you have the more reliable data on. And it's really those in-between trips like from Little Falls to Walker where you have two options. As they start becoming similar travel times, you really start basing it on experience of, do I want to stop at restaurants or gas, or do I want to get to my destination by a certain time, so I'm going to pick the faster route or more reliable route. So these considerations do impact businesses as well in trying to have more traffic on 371 so that those percentage of pass-by trips also, the percentage stays the same, but the amount of pass-by trips increases because you're increasing that volume along 371.
So in essence, like I've heard arguments done particularly in the metro about don't do things like this because it induces demand. Is that's what you're essentially saying is in a way, by improving this intersection, we are asking more people to drive through this intersection?
Correct. And that has benefits elsewhere where an interchange is safer than a signalized intersection. So if you're pulling more traffic into a safer intersection, you are going to reduce crashes, not just at that intersection location, but also in a more citywide sense. Because you're making it easier to come through safer intersections.
Just a comment here. First of all, I think you did a great job with the amount of time you had to it. I find it interesting that you actually uncovered some information we never had before, which, not to slam anybody else, but there's actually more information in some areas than what we had to deal with. And one of them is just tying into to have it here. I found it interesting, and that's all I'm going to say is I found it interesting that because we've heard through this whole process is people aren't going to want to come through the city. They're not going to come through the city. It shows they already aren't. They've already made that determination. They're tired of it. They're tired of the foolishness without the traffic and delays. And so, you know, our numbers haven't changed in 2 years, and we, like you say, we know the people are here. The volume of people hasn't changed. It has gone up. But the traffic pattern hasn't, and the pattern has gone up in these other areas. So I think that, and again, it's just a comment, but those are people that business people are not having a chance at because they're going around us. They're going other directions. And so if we make I'm not selling anything here, but if the road gets improved so people come back, the chances of having more shots at those people for services and goods, in theory, you would think would come out. So that's an interesting, to me, it's a very interesting slide.
And I've painted a picture of the facts. Like I've not tried to lead in one decision or another. Like you guys have a tough decision to come to municipal consent. There are going to be impacts to the businesses. Just having more turns to do a business, if that travel time is less, people are willing to make that trip as much as today. That travel time is more, people are going to go to the grocery store that has that shorter travel trip to them. I make that decision every time I go out for groceries. I have 3 different grocery stores I can go to, depending on what time of day it is. There's a couple that get very congested and I go to the other one. That's the decision that people make in their trip planning on a micro level. So I think a project like this is going to cause a lot of pain points to businesses, especially during construction. That's something I didn't have a slide on, but any type of major construction like this, it is going to be impactful for businesses, and that's really where a city council can, and Chamber of Commerce can really support those businesses through different tools if this project were to move forward to help offset some of those impacts. But anytime there's a major construction project like this, I've done a lot of them throughout the state, it's a hard year for businesses, or it's a hard 2 years for businesses during that construction project.
So I have a question about speed. You talked about, your recommendation would have been to reduce the speed to 55. I think anytime that I've heard speed come up with MnDOT, their response is usually our hands are tied. So we design it for 60, and whomever decides the speed comes through and throws the speed limit on. So do you have any thoughts, background information?
So through
How can we encourage that?
Yeah, through my experience with the International Traffic Engineers, or ITE, I've got a lot of experience looking at how other states, how as a nation, speed limit conversations are changing. You don't want to post something at 45 miles an hour and have vehicles coming through at 65 or 70 miles an hour, because that creates speed shear. And that creates to more serious crashes and weaving that increased crash rates along those segments. So that's really where speed limit design is rooted in calculations based on the 85th percentile in the past. However, there are design elements that can be made as projects to try to create more friction. With 371, because it's a trunk highway, it's going to be less impactful when there aren't those signals kind of creating that reduction of speed. But lane widths can be important. Instead of 13-foot lanes, considering 11 and a half or 12, or I'm not sure what the lane width's being designed at, but decreasing that helps to decrease speeds. It just creates a tighter environment for people as they're going through this segment. I think having businesses along the road, having lights at night, in the evenings, during the winter, that helps people know that they're coming into a community, and people's reaction is to slow down as they enter a community. So there's a balance, because MnDOT does have statewide procedures in place where they won't post the speed until they build it and then monitor what that speed is. But some of those design elements, lane widths, grading on how that interchange is constructed, little details like that, how long an acceleration lane is for that northbound merge, can all help reduce the speeds going through this interchange and make it so that those speeds are still low as they come into the water. And I would...
I'm seeing, there's another slide that referenced 80% of accidents here are rear-end accidents.
Yep.
In my mind, that's directly related to speed.
Yep, it's high speeds coming into intersections that are congested where you're dropping to zero. So, yeah, that's a good comparison.
Council, any other questions, comments?
Is, while you're on that slide, I
Yeah.
just wanted to double check, that's not, I didn't mishear you, that's not third worst crash rate
Is
in
the-
county, northern Minnesota.
It's the third highest intersection in Minnesota. It is the first for signalized traffic control. So the two that are above it are two multi-lane roundabouts that are 2x2s, one in Mankato, one in Lakeville. That there are some design intricacies with those. They're very high volume. They're probably a similar volume to what's going through this intersection. And that's why we look at an interchange now versus a high volume roundabout that has 2 or 3 lanes and approaches. That's been a conscious decision of MnDOT to try not to put in 2x2 roundabouts in the state. So I did have a couple slides just with a couple examples that I thought might come up. There are a lot of roundabout interchanges throughout the country. I pulled 5 examples. One's in Anoka, where we do have some of those closely spaced roundabouts. Green Bay, Carmel, Eagle, Avon, Colorado. In that picture in Carmel, I believe I counted, I think it was 16 or 18 roundabouts in about a mile. We're probably not going to make it to that point in Baxter. But this is a trend that is becoming more common in states throughout the U.S. and especially in Minnesota. With Clearwater, Minnesota, having an interchange with a roundabout closely spaced. Malacca is looking at 3 closely spaced roundabouts around an interchange. And then there's a project in Bemidji, which is one of the ones I've worked on, that has 2 state roundabouts with 3 city roundabouts in close proximity. And this is expected to really make it easier for vehicles to get in and out of a Target, a big mall here, a Walmart across the street. Roundabouts work very well with commercial traffic because they can take in a lot of traffic and a lot of turning movements and not have that delay of waiting for different approaches to get a green light. So until they get to that capacity threshold, they're usually operating with minimal delay. And project areas like that, that's where you see that 50-60% delay reduction and making it easier for both regional traffic and local traffic to get in and out of businesses. The last thing I saw was just kind of a comparison of surveys. So this was forwarded to me today. But the Chamber did a survey and MnDOT has done a survey in the past. Those are 2 very conflicting surveys about what they say. I just wanted to go over the technical information from them and summarize them in a slide. You guys can look into more of the details of the study. But the Harper polling one had 30% support of 300 responses. So 69% were minor or major unsupportive of the project moving forward, compared to MnDOT polling from earlier this year that had 70 to 75% support in about 70 responses. Most of the opposition in that Harper polling survey that I was able to look at this afternoon, the big impacts are harming local business and being complicated and confusing. I think I had 2 slides on that today. I encourage you to look back at how those impacts and considerations are affecting the project area. Most opposition to the MnDOT polling was signals on 210, which have since been updated to those roundabouts. And then just general confusion, so again, complicated and confusing. What elements with this project can we work with MnDOT on to make it less complicated and confusing? Signage is going to be a big one of that. And if you can make those left or right decisions simplified for people, it becomes a lot less complicated and confusing while people are driving it. So survey results are representative of how questions are asked. I think that's the big difference between those 2 results. to a certain point. MnDOT has a technical solution that they want to highlight as being the right choice. Chamber of Commerce had a survey done. I don't know the bias behind it, but all surveys do have some bias. And just looking at the facts of how those questions were asked and what the result of those questions impact how this project moves forward is a very tough decision for the council. So I hope breaking down some of the technical information was helpful to you.
Okay, thank you. So the agenda item tonight was to hear the presentation and then to make a motion to accept the summary as explained to us tonight. So,
Move to accept the summary.
motion by Cabot,
Second.
second by Vassil. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Mayor, before we go on to the next item, just want to cut to the chase and not wait till the end of the meeting. In that context, we do have a timeframe in which the council needs to make a decision related to municipal consent. We only have one council meeting between now and that deadline. Looking for direction from the council as if you want to put that on the next council meeting, January 20th, or do you want a special meeting to have that as a standalone? Looking for direction.
Thoughts?
I don't think I need any more information to vote.
Yeah, I would just not have another meeting, just have it on the agenda.
Have it on the agenda.
I agree.
What's that?
On the
To
agenda.
have it on the agenda.
On the 20th.
On the 20th. I think we were holding off for this report for more information. We want to give every benefit of the doubt. So we've got that now. We've had it for a couple of days. We can take it home and regurgitate it. We got Matt's email here today too with his additional information. It's more to look at, but maybe we'll be ready then by the 20th. Matt, looks like.
Well, I will make sure that it's on the agenda and notify the at the chamber of the decision that it'll be resolution either supporting or disapproving will be on the agenda for council to make a final decision on that date. So thank you.
Okay, number 13. Bradley?
Yeah, actually, I'll turn it over to
Very good.
Finance Director, Messina, to do presentation on this item.
Thank you, Your Honor and Council. We wanted to continue the discussion a little bit on the local option sales tax.
It's a very hard spot to do on.
Local sales tax extension. As you know, the process has changed a little bit. We are now required to pass a resolution and submit that to the tax chairs, both the House and the Senate, at the end of January to start that process. That's something new that we had to do. The previous authorization and extension was done in 2014. So as we kind of work through this, I want to just provide a little bit of background history, kind of where we've been with the sales tax and kind of what we're looking at, and then any other discussion you want to have as we put together that resolution. So again, just kind of looking at the history, what projects we have financed in the past with the sales tax, and then some of the infrastructure needs and how the sales tax can potentially finance those projects. So starting with the history, as you all know, this process has been around for quite a bit of time, since the early 2000s. And it's really just based on the philosophy that we as a regional center, the low population base that we do have here shouldn't have to pay for all those regional construction needs that come at a pretty significant cost as we provide those services to the region. And then it does allow us, in fact, to the ability to capture some of those revenues that we are providing for those regional services. And as you know, we do receive very little intergovernmental aid. Most recently, local government aid was restored, but it's only $200,000 a year of our multi-million-dollar budget. So we kind of looked at the fact that it was a minimizing the residential impact compared to other revenue sources, as I alluded to earlier, just a small population base compared to our commercial industrial tax base, and a substantial portion of that tax at the time was estimated to be borne by non-residents. At the time, it was estimated about 80%. So I'm kind of looking at the local option sales tax legislative criteria and history that were specific to the city of Baxter. It does require both state and local approval prior to the implementation. With original authorization in 2004, we actually went to the voters first, and then we went to the legislature, got extension in 2006. With that had since changed where the state had wanted to see legislative approval prior to going to the voters for that approval. And that's in fact what we did with the 2014 extension. Secondly, it must be used for capital projects. You can't use it for ongoing operating costs. And those typically can either be in the form of bonded capital projects or on a pay-as-you-go basis. We have been pretty successful in using a large portion of that on a pay-as-you-go basis, which has minimized the need for interest borrowing costs related to those projects. The most significant project that we have financed with that would be our share of the wastewater treatment capacity with the city of Brainerd. The city of Brainerd and Brainerd Public Utilities had issued debt related to that, for which we're paying back our share of that third cost. And then the other project that we bonded for was the water treatment plant that we constructed. So past projects have included both those utility projects as well as stormwater and traffic safety infrastructure. The third criteria is once sunsets, you have to indicate a date when it would sunset, either a certain number of years or a certain dollar amount, and then having a regional component to the project is also necessary. So some of the legislative criteria that changed since 2004, and this is what we'd be operating under right now. There was previously a moratorium in place that projects had been approved up to 2023. After that, there was a moratorium on place for 2 years that has now since expired. So kind of revert back to what the statute was in place in 2023 at this point. So the new statute does require, the statute requirements do require us that we can submit only up to 5 projects to those tax committee chairs with the descriptions in the regional benefit narrative. It's a little bit of a difference from what we had in the past, where we identify water, wastewater, traffic safety improvements, as well as stormwater projects without getting into specific projects, and it was one ballot question. Now the requirement is to have ballot questions for each of the projects. Looking just kind of look quickly at a history of kind of the collections, you can kind of see since implementation, the first year, 2006, was only 1/4 of the year. But then the first full year in 2007, we collected a little over $2 million. That has grown over the years. There was a slight dip in 2007, 2008 with the recession. And then most recently in 2024, we saw just a slight dip. Part of that also is due to the fact the state changed how those payments are made to us. There's now an additional delay where the December portion of the sales tax isn't received until March. So it's outside of the collection period that we recognize. But there was, outside of that, it was still a slight reduction of about 2.4%, 2.8%, excuse me. Through year to date, which is the full month that we've collected to date, we are up just slightly about 0.12% from the same period last year. Overall, looking from the 2007 first year collection through 2024's full year collection, the tax has grown by about 78%. Some of that could be due to just the increased sales we have, but also internet sales also became relevant during that time period too, with the Supreme Court Wayfair decision taxing internet sales too also has helped probably with the collection. So for the Baxter projects that have been financed with the existing local option sales tax, with the 2006 authorization of $15 million, we did initially finance $2.9 million of bonds, towards that $10.3 million water treatment plant. In addition to that, a little over $9.5 million for a majority of the share of the wastewater treatment project. It serves the two cities with Green Public Utilities. And then $2.6 million was utilized on a pay-as-you-go basis or with cash to pay for the east water tower that was constructed along Highway 371 with no need to issue debt. When we did go back for the 2014 extension, when we reached the $15 million authorization early, we requested $40 million. With that, we were able to utilize another $2.9 million towards the water treatment plant bonds that were still outstanding, so a total of about $5.8 million of or a little over half of the $10.3 million project. In addition to that, we financed various infrastructure projects on a pay-as-you-go basis, including water improvements, including most recently the 2 new wells, $6 million of sanitary sewer improvements, almost $5 million of stormwater improvements, and about 4.4 of traffic safety improvements. And then the other component in that authorization was a requirement that $8 million or 20% of the proceeds were utilized with the revenue sharing agreement to finance the water and sewer infrastructure improvements to the airport. So next, kind of looking at some of the future infrastructure needs and how the sales tax extension could potentially finance those projects. We projected to have sufficient revenues, as you know, by early 2027, which would be long before our current authorization expires in 2037. So for projections based on another 20-year extension of that tax, which would take us through 2046, we could support about $77 million of capital projects. In addition to that, the debt service, interest, and issuance costs associated with bonds. The bonds were issued towards those projects. So kind of utilizing kind of a three-legged stool approach, kind of looking at combining kind of water and wastewater, hopefully to provide a little bit of flexibility to us. We've identified projects in the water and wastewater capacity, just kind of continuing what we currently are doing with water and wastewater improvements, but I'll get to that in a second, but looking kind of at some of the wastewater treatment plant needs at the Greater Public Utilities plant for the city's share of that, as well as some of the water plant improvements to our own system. And then kind of continuing with some of the traffic safety improvements, utilizing it for street transportation improvements impacted by some of the regional highways. You know, you kind of heard some of those conversations coming up a little bit tonight, not specifically on 371 or 210 or with the potential interchange project if it does proceed, but it's just some of the other ancillary costs that we could be facing in the future, whether it's roundabouts at Douglas Fir and College, or roundabout proposed at Glory and Isle, extension of Cypress Drive potentially in the future, the Foley Road improvements that potentially would be needed. So some of those other impacts, just looking at it from a regional component, that the city does have regional use on its local streets that were impacted and are required to finance those costs. And then finally, public safety facility improvements for the city. So just kind of looking at that a little bit more closer, we're utilizing $51 million of the 77 towards wastewater and water utility improvements, including $32 million potentially would fund a portion of the city's share of those various wastewater improvements that have been identified in the most recent study, and $19 million for various water treatment plant improvements, well, construction as well as a new water tower. Those costs are identified right now at about $23 million, of which $19 million would help fund a significant portion of those. And then allocating $16 million to the second question for regional transportation improvements that are impacted by the highway system. So kind of looking at some of those frontage road roundabouts, signal lights, alternative parallel streets for local traffic in those vicinities. And then third, the question would be for public safety facility improvements, allocating up to $10 million for the construction and equipment of the new police department public safety facility that will service the city as well as its regional needs. So kind of looking at just kind of the key dates that would be coming up with this process. In January, as I alluded to earlier, we need to adopt a resolution supporting the sales of motor vehicle excise tax extension. And then that request has to be forwarded to both the House and Senate tax committees by the end of the month. And then the legislature does convene on February 17th. And must adjourn at the latest May 18th, so we would know at that point whether our sales tax extension was approved. We'd be working on it with the legislature over those 3-month period. And then 84 days prior to the general election, if the sales tax is approved by the legislature, we have to submit the ballot question to Crow Wing County. And then finally, the election for that would be on November 3rd. So those are kind of some of the key dates that occur kind of in between there, and there's certainly be other work to be doing in between that process. So for tonight, I think we're just kind of looking for thoughts on the proposed resolution that we've had our public finance attorney assist us in putting together. The one part that we'll be adding to the appendix is the supporting documentation of the various studies, I guess, that I alluded to, whether it's the wastewater study that was recently done by PPU. We have a water camp study that was done from the city, as well as a corridor study too that's being done as part of the MnDOT corridor from Baxter to Nisswa.
Good.
That's it. Try to be quick, I guess, but the questions certainly.
Questions of the staff?
Thanks, I have a couple, or one maybe. I'm wondering regarding, I know you had, maybe it was $10 million listed last time you discussed this, for the public safety facilities, yeah, sorry. I just wanted to make sure to check, okay, the city and its regional needs. I was just thinking this would be the opportunity to make sure that we're building in regional training rooms and opportunities for the police department to become more of a collaborative agency with other agencies in the county and beyond in terms of the resources it can provide. I think that would be a good argument in favor of the regional effect, and I'm certain that other departments would benefit from a variety of training opportunities that we can provide here.
Sure.
Yeah, we tried to leave a little bit of flexibility in the number too, noting that it's going to cost money to obviously equip it as well, so having some funds for those costs.
The other thing that we intend to utilize as it relates to public safety is it's one of the projects that were, areas that were identified as regionally significant that came out of the task force that was put in place during the moratorium. That was to make recommendation to the state legislature that ultimately did not get adopted, but that group was bringing forward identifying areas of investment in which were to be deemed regionally significant, and public safety facilities was one of them. So,
I did, I guess I didn't have a chance to talk to Brad too, but our public finance attorney did get back to me today too. They put together an extensive list of who had authority in 2023 under the new authorization, and there were a few cities in there. Golden Valley was one of them. I believe Hibbing was another one, and it was a third suburb too that had used it for public safety too. So it wouldn't be unheard of to request it for public safety if it was based on some of those other cities that had been given authority.
Sounds good.
Yeah, really just trying to take a three-legged approach here because, some of these things impact various things differently, whether it's the property tax levy, which would be impacted, if the funding wasn't available from the sales tax to pay for the public safety, would fall probably most likely on the property tax levy, just like conversely with the water and sewer rates would be impacted too by if the sales tax wasn't available to pay for some of those larger infrastructure needs.
Okay. I would just like to add that I had a chance to ran into our state representative this last week, I guess it was. Apparently you guys had met with both the rep and the senator about this scenario here. Anyway, he just heaped all kinds of praise to how you guys were organized and what a good impression you made, and good choice of not only staff, but good choice of our liaison. So those are pretty good things to hear. So anyway, you guys did a great job, and I'll just drag us to the finish line.
No pressure.
council is in agreement with what Jeremy has laid out, be looking for council to adopt resolution 2026-004, supporting the extension of the sales tax.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2026-004.
I will second.
Second by Ms. Silva, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thanks, guys, for all your work. Council comments, Connie?
Just want to recognize one of our very own. Mark Cross is going to be honored at the Distinguished Service Award program coming up on the 10th of January, and Mark will be receiving his award for the Community Service Provider of the Year. So, congratulations.
Thank you.
That's all.
Good. Zach?
Congratulations as well. I, on a kind of maybe related note in a way, I think there's some room at this kind of juncture in the city that I think it's time that we think a little bit harder as a city, as a community, about the pride we put into our community, the ways that we can encourage more people to serve the community, to really only the fact that we've had all this growth. We will continue to see growth, but I think we really want to take the opportunity to own our brand as a city of Baxter, and the future looks really good to me. And I think that we have an opportunity to just inject the chance for civic organizations to do more arts in the park type events, more civic kind of engagement things, and just build a little bit more civic pride here, to build on the we've talked about roundabouts for the last several months, and we have dozens or several roundabouts in the city the way it is, and there's an opportunity to maybe let a civic group do flower plantings or something in some of the ones that don't have landscaping. I think there's just an opportunity for us to build on those little pieces of civic pride that, maybe as an example, the Christmas light thing is something that maybe we're turning a corner on. The dog park is something that people are proud of. So I just think that we should start to really be a little more publicly proud of the city of Baxter.
Good point. Henry?
I'll throw out if you haven't had a chance to go check out the ice skating trail at the Yard Arena. The grounds crew out there busted their butts and managed to make it happen, and it's the social media presence that our area has gotten. Not only do we now have a regional park, we've now got the longest, the only woodland skating trail in Minnesota. So, and we'll keep building it. So I think that's if you haven't had a chance to get out there, it's created a renewed interest in the Arboretum. So.
And that kudos to that staff, the director, they really, really work hard. They've, that arb's had ups and downs over the years, and it has really maintained excellence in the last few years here. It's through hard work and the board, of which Patrick's one of, take a real interest in it too. It's a really great organization. Mark?
I agree with that, Patrick. I won't be strapping any skates on, but I have seen it on social media, and I have seen some news reporting on it, and the byline is Baxter, which is good. Zach, you bring up an interesting concept, which I think the mayor and I had talked about a little bit, trying to think of and come up with some type of potentially signature event for Baxter. And, maybe it takes a committee or something to sit down with us and, get that ball rolling. Okay, a couple of questions I have. Do we have a list of road improvements that will have to be made in order to facilitate the construction idea of where all this is coming from and going to until November now? And anyone can answer that.
There's components, yes. In regards to the CIP, the focus of it is those that have been identified in the long-range CIP that Public Works Director Walter has identified and has presented to the council previously, but in the context of the inclusion of the improvements for the local roads that are outside of that CIP that are related to 371 are not part of that initial equation, so it'll be an add-on after, or a part of the CIP discussion that we would have to have later this spring.
So at this point, is there a plan B to facilitate those costs if we don't get sales tax extension?
There's state aid funds that would be available, and then we would go after grants. There's certain grant programs on certain highways that we could apply for, such as like, highway safety, HSIP, like we did for the trail on County Road 48. I can't apply right now because it's not a project, so the round of HSIP and those LRIP grants are right now due here at the end of January. So yes, we go after grants and look at our state aid funding and other sources, but targeting right now, hoping that sales tax would be a majority of it.
A component of it.
Or a component.
A component of it, and on top of that, these improvements that are reflected in that memo aren't necessarily need to be done in 2028, 2029. It's giving recognition that somewhere in the future, that Fairview getting extended to Excelsior doesn't have necessarily a time frame, but we do know that other things might occur more faster pace, such as the dual left turns on Glory and College, things of that nature.
But is there a list of things that have to be done onto our roads in order for us to build this MnDOT project?
I
Or
said
are we
that,
okay the way it is?
no, I took and put a list together, yes, it's in there, and it's all set with dollar amounts.
I know you guys don't need any more work, but maybe it'd be good if you
I can summarize it all and send it out to you.
put that on. I think it's a good question. Yeah, it'd be good to see that, so. In your spare time.
Yeah.
That's all I have, thank you.
That it? Okay, I just want to say that, got a big vote coming up, and I want to thank the council and staff. You guys have attended hours and hours of meetings. You've read. I've read my packet so many times it's worn out, and wanting to do the right thing. So I just appreciate the due diligence that everybody has given, no matter how you vote, irrespective of what that vote is. I just appreciate the effort, showing up and asking questions and being educated one way or the other. So right, wrong, or indifferent, it'll soon be over. But so I just wanted to thank everybody for everything that you've done for this project up to this point. City Administrator?
Just one item, Your Honor. Just before the meeting, I laid in front of each of you a draft copy of a pressing notice that we are intending to send out at the end of the week, or later this week, excuse me. It's hard to believe that it's been 5 years since the completion of the northern half of Forest View Street and Sewer and Water project. At the time that we moved the project forward, we did amend our mandatory connection from 1 year to 5 years. We are now at that 5-year window. We have, Trevor, approximately 20 that have yet to. 22 that have not connected. We're sending this notice out and letting them know that the 5-year window is up and that they will start to begin to receive a non-user fee fee that they'll be responsible for, and that by the middle of the year, June 30th, as is reflected in the letter, that the council will then make a determination if we would move forward with official notice and take necessary actions to get them to connect. But wanted council to be aware of that and share that with you. So
And it,
that is all I have for report, but we do have a closed session item pursuant to Minnesota statute 13D.03 for discussion on labor negotiations. So we're looking for a motion now.
I will make a motion to close the open session and open the votes.
Second.